When do you start? You start when you've finished. This is your daily message from Chad number 624, and this message is dedicated to author Richard Snow. That lead statement is not a riddle. Once you know the ending, then begin. If you saw a guy hammering some 2x4s together and walked up to him and asked, "What are you building?" and he answered, "I don't know, I have a pile of wood here, so I thought I'd just start and see what happens," you'd immediately think the guy was either lying or crazy. But how often are you hammering away at something like this? One of Stephen Covey's famous habits from his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, is beginning with the end in mind. He says everything is created twice, first in the mind and then in reality. The reason you're disappointed with reality sometimes is you didn't plan your results in your mind beforehand. The letter V in my mindset acrostic is visualize. This isn't woo-woo new agey stuff. This is simply picturing what you want and then taking action to get it. To illustrate this, I want to tell you the story of Walt Disney. Richard Snow, in his book Disney's Land, tells the story of Walt's construction of his masterpiece. But it doesn't begin with buying 240 acres of orange groves in Southern California and building a bunch of amusement park rides. Disneyland started in Walt's mind. Around 1950, Walt was depressed. He was the undisputed king of animation, but the government's takeover of his studios in World War II, betrayals by his animators, and the deaths of his mom and dad from a gas leak in a home he built for them had drained him of his celebrated magic. During this time, he became oddly fascinated with miniature trains and railroads, creating elaborate models in his home. Fascinated is too tame of a word. Walt was obsessed. He ended up building a half-mile railway around the 5-acre property. It was an 8th-scale track he named the Carrollwood Pacific after the home's address at 355 Carrollwood Drive. The engine was named the Lily Bell after his wife. Walt visited Henry Ford's museum in Dearborn, Michigan in his Greenfield Village. This was the first outdoor museum where Ford relocated over 100 historical buildings, created a place where people could experience what life was like in the United States when it was founded. Walt's cartoons brought to life on the screen experiences that people could only read about before and see in their minds. Walt's power of animation literally brought stories to life. But Walt was always unhappy with his films. First, once they were made and distributed in theaters, they were over, and he couldn't alter the many aspects he was dissatisfied with. Second, his cartoons were two-dimensional. People could watch them, but not participate, not experience the magical worlds he created. He wanted to create a 3-dimensional film as an immersive storytelling experience. This would be much different than the amusement park and carnivals that already existed. This would be a theme park, a story people could step into, and it would never be done. It would be alive, always changing, always improving. Disneyland was treated as a movie set, not a construction project. Walt pored over blueprints, knowing the dimensions of every building and placement of every tree. He didn't want employees working at Disneyland. They would be cast members. Cast members worked backstage, not in employee-only areas. Customers would be guests, and guests would not be seeing rides or shows, but attractions. During construction, a worker suggested leaving leather straps off stagecoaches to save time and money. Walt objected. He said, "People will notice. Don't you ever forget that. They will respond to it. They will appreciate it." Another story was about railing on top of a building that was to be wrought iron. It was suggested to substitute plastic because of the expense, and it was 40 or 50 feet in the air. Nobody would notice. Walt wouldn't allow it. He would not lower his standard that he had in his mind. Well, opening day was a success. Walt was at the gates when they opened to greet his guests July 17th, 1955. Traffic to Disneyland created a 7-mile jam on the Santa Ana Freeway. The grand opening was televised and 90 million people tuned in, 54% of the population. In the first month, 500,000 guests experienced what Walt had originally imagined as he puttered around on his miniature train track on Carrollwood Drive, and guests have been pouring in the Magic Kingdom ever since. But for Walt, this was no surprise. He saw it all before. For you, complete what you want in your mind, then start. You can email me what you have in mind at fromchadsmith@gmail.com and read the transcript of this story and hundreds of others at fromchad.com.